The Art of Lucid Dreaming. Episode 1. A podcast juxtaposed between the waking world and dream realities. Photographs, text, and podcast created by Jack Lamb. Copyright 2026 John S. Lamb, all rights reserved. Observations about the nature of consciousness. My introduction to lucid dreaming. I never heard of astral projection or lucid dreaming until Buzz brought his new girlfriend Terry Denton down to Singing Stones to meet us, and she said it as we cozily sipped mulled wine around the fireplace later that evening. Because of the bitterly cold winter weather and the deep snow obscuring the 2-mile-long primitive road out, as well as the exigency to ford the 3-foot-deep ice-covered stream, Nancy suggested they spend the night in our loft. And while the vibrant young woman thought it a splendid idea, our close friend professed indecision. "It's so quiet here. Sleeping in this house would be perfect for dreamwalking," Terry pleaded to coax him. Looking to Buzz for an explanation of dreamwalking, I saw him lift both palms up in repudiation. "Don't look at me," asked Terry. "It's not within my areas of expertise." Nodding at the wall of books illuminated by the glow of kerosene lamps, she chided me impishly. "Seriously, you must have at least one book about dreamwalking?" "I don't," I confessed, rueful at her mischievous dig. "Well, dreamwalking is what it sounds like, walking consciously in a dream," she explained matter-of-factly. "And you've done this?" I asked with keen interest. After she nodded her assent, I squinted at Buzz for corroboration, and tilting his head towards his girlfriend, he answered noncommittally. "This is the first I've heard of it. But knowing Terry, I wouldn't put it past her." "How's it done?" I inquired just as a huge oak log balanced between the brace of andirons broke and fell, spreading an eruption of embers on the hearth. "It's not easy, but it's not difficult either if you know how to start," Terry contended as I grabbed the shovel to scoop up the coals and toss them into the fire. Being awake while sleeping is paradoxical. Buzz weighed in with bemused pragmatic skepticism. "You can't dreamwalk if you're asleep, silly," she scolded him as if this truth was obvious. "You have to awaken inside the dream before you can dreamwalk." "If you're awake, then how can you be dreaming?" Nancy chimed in from the rocking chair beside Buzz. "That's the trick," Terry conceded. "You need to awaken in the dream without actually waking up." Nancy frowned suspiciously at her reply, while Buzz rolled his eyes upward without moving his head to stare at the peak of the 22-foot-tall chimney. However, I found her assertion intriguing, and wanted to learn more. "It seems like it would be difficult, if not impossible, to become conscious in a dream," I mused thoughtfully. "I can't imagine how to even begin to accomplish it." "I can tell you how it works for me," Terry offered. "Ah, please do," Buzz interjected judiciously. "Haven't you ever fallen in a dream?" she asked. "I mean, fallen out of a tree or plummeted out of the sky?" All three of us nodded affirmatively. "And what happened when you fell?" Terry pressed. "I always wake up," Nancy replied, after which Buzz and I quickly nodded our agreement. "The next time you fall, don't wake up and leave the dream, instead, wake up in the dream," Terry asserted. Several months later, she gifted me a book on astral projection entitled Journeys Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe, Doubleday, New York 1971. And during the next few years as we became friends, we often discussed dreamwalking, Terry as my mentor and me as her student. I diligently meditated on astral projection each night before I slept. But perhaps because I generally only slept 2 or 3 hours a day, I had trouble dreaming, let alone dreamwalking. So by the time I haphazardly managed to awaken conscious in a dream a year later, in her dreams Terry nightly flew fully conscious over mountains, rivers, and forests in euphoric lucidity. Nocturnally consciously projecting her astral body in a lucid dream was an end in itself for her, so Terry never wanted to explore the dream world in any other way, nor would she ever have forced herself into another person's dream. Innocently lacking the foibles plaguing the rest of us, she entirely lived within her present temporality. In many ways, she reminded me of a wood nymph or fairy, wide-eyed and attentive to everything happening around her, but ready to take flight into the protection of the forest at the crack of a snapped twig. Terry lived as if she had but a single foot within our reality, and seemed to be able to look into worlds only she could see. An amazing woodcarver, Terry could carve anything from memory, as if she actually studied the creatures of nature through a portal in her mind's eye. After watching her carefully carve a block of walnut for hours as the form of a spirited stallion with its neck arched and nostrils flared at a threat only the equine and Terry perceived. Mystified at her photographic accuracy, I had to know how she did it. "How can you carve a horse in such detail without using a model?" I queried in mystification, assessing the expanded veins in the neck of the wooden stallion in her hand, clearly alarmed by something only it could see. Looking up from her delicate work, with a twinkle in her eye, Terry cheerily countered. "But I'm looking at the horse right now. It's standing in a glade in the forest right before my astral eyes, staring at a deer along the edge of the clearing. The stallion's eyes aren't that sharp, so he's understandably nervous. I tried telling him it's only a harmless doe, and so nothing to be afraid of. But he's stubborn like most males are, and won't listen to reason. I want to see what you see." I whispered a wish. "But you can see it if you try," Terry insisted without a hint of guile. "You just need to open your inner eye." Oh look! A gray rabbit just hopped out of the trees into the clearing, making that skittish stallion even more anxious than he was. She giggled while whittling blithely on the carving in her hand before scolding the stallion only she could see. "Silly horse. It's only a little rabbit." Terry Denton playing one of her many instruments. Additionally, she was an amazingly accomplished musician capable of playing by ear practically any musical instrument she picked up, and make it resonate in otherworldly ways. This may be why even now 20 years later, her haunting syncopated flailed banjo melodies still drift through my recollection. I will forever prize the striking Arabian horse head block she carved atop the exquisite mountain dulcimer made of rosewood, walnut, and spruce, which Buzz crafted for me. I lost touch with Terry after she went to work for the National Geographic magazine in Washington, D.C. But I often wondered how her wildling spirit fared confined within the concrete and steel of the nation's capital. And I worried about whether her innocent wonderment might have become world-wearied by the stark materialism of the automatonic drones she encountered in the city. Some years later, I unexpectedly received a postcard from her, scribbled with a worrisome and nearly illegible supplication to come and dreamwalk with her. "Life is hard here and I am fading. Come and meet me in my dreams. I will be the disembodied spirit." Floating above Washington, D.C. Out-of-body experiences were never my forte, to soar disembodied as a spirit through the commonplace reality in which we customarily live. So although I tried several times to meet her in my dreams, I never succeeded. Then not many months later, I received word from Buzz that Terry Denton had died in Washington, D.C. from an overdose of sleeping pills. The National Geographic magazine article An Ozark Family Carves a Living and a Way of Life, Volume 146, Number 1, page 124, July 1975, written and photographed by Bruce Dale, includes photographs of Terry and many of the wood carvings she sculpted while she still lived with her family in a log cabin built by her father Ivan deep in the North Arkansas mountains. Dream Guides and Lucid Dreams. Perhaps I never tried to follow a path towards out-of-body experiences, as did Terry, because I saw too many parallels between dreams and the altered states of reality I experienced on hallucinogenic substances. For in truth, astral projection is better suited to a serene and observant perspective such as hers, whereas I tend to dive headlong into an altered state of reality and explore it from within. Several books implied it was very important to find a dream guide if I was to make any progress in becoming conscious in my dreams, and I did eventually encounter two. The first guide I chanced upon wore a coarse robe over which a white beard draped to his midsection. My guide never actually spoke to me nor I to him, for we communicated telepathically in existential gestalts of interrogation and understanding. Thus, I simply formed a question, honestly not more than a directed query. And before I could express it in words, I parapsychologically sensed an equally nonverbal response akin to an inherent, profound comprehension, comparable to the way I might have felt had my answer been mundanely vocalized. It is extremely difficult even now to put my telepathic discussion with this dream guide into words. But when I left him, I no longer had doubts about the dream world being any less viable than the waking world, and just as feasible a medium for existence. Thus, based on this encounter, I acquired the confidence I required to become lucidly conscious in my dreams henceforth. Straightforward to comprehend, but insanely difficult to put into practice. If I were actually to awaken, I had to sublimate my awareness in my dreams, for the power one commands by being absolutely conscious tends to modify the dream reality just as overpoweringly as an enormous tidal wave will inundate a coastline. So, the trick I had to learn was to contain my consciousness completely, while still being aware of its substantiation in the dream. And if I had to act, it must be through assimilating a subliminal intent no greater than the wisp of a thought, analogous to the manner in which a scalpel makes an incisive incision. So while the tenet of ethicality I followed regulated my resolve not to manifest overt change in lucid dreams, I was nevertheless prepared to employ thaumaturgies and sortileges to manifest change as necessary, without affecting the dream's plotline. And over time I realized that whenever I found my consciousness locked within a lucid dream in which I never felt the compulsion to do anything but adhere to what the preordained script prescribed. Thus, my degree of lucidity might not be as apparent as it would be if I elected to manifest far-reaching global change by redrawing the dream reality with the power of my conscious intent. So subsequently playing my dream role in accordance with the causative cues prompted by the dream players I encountered within dream scenes, I allowed the dream to unfold according to its own obscure storyline. Trust me when I say it took decades truly to learn to sublimate my ego to where my full consciousness could persist extant in a dream, and not surprisingly, given the requisite modus operandi I must employ, I usually found myself a passive observer. Still, with my consciousness ensconced within a dream body I sometimes identify as me and other times as a different personality, I am able to examine my surroundings, the other performers, and our interactions with astute perspicacity. As a result, in each nightly instantiation, my dream realities can become just as real as my experiences in my waking world, offering indistinguishably analogous sensory interactions. In passing, the second time I met a dream guide in a dream, like a neophyte I peculiarly demanded validation for wisdom I acquired the first time, so not unreasonably, he dismissively turned his back on me. It ultimately took a long time to encounter another dream guide, although it occurs to me, I might have avoided a third encounter out of lingering mortification at my earlier importunity. The methodology I learned from my original dream guide about how to maintain my consciousness in a dream reality is surprisingly effectually identical to what I have named my artifice of assimilation. The reason for this enigma is that years before I grasped the parallel procedure in dreams, I had already expertly mastered it in my waking reality. Hence, I often question whether I might have ultimately learned to awaken my consciousness in a lucid dream as proficiently, had I not expended so much of my cognizance employing an artifice of assimilation in my waking reality to manifest a future temporality in alignment with my conscious intent. During my lifelong quest to discern the true nature of consciousness, I ascertained how intention is determined within our individual time continuums, and why one fate will take precedent over other potential outcomes. And I chanced to comprehend how to ensure that my intent will be ambiguously manifested into reality as an actuality at an indeterminate forthcoming point in time, by planting a vectored seed of conscious intent, frankly no more than a pre-thought sliding unseen along the temporal continuum unchecked, until it manifests within my future destiny. Subsequently, to manifest outcomes conducive to the attainment of my metaphysical objectives I envision a progression to channel me through the unfathomable forest of unconscious hedonistic materialism life exploits to capture awareness, by using a process I call an artifice of assimilation. Employing this specific procedure, I never attempt to focus my conscious intent on a single specific pathway through the myriads of imaginable temporalities lying potentially before me, but simply encourage a potentiality to manifest in the manner I ultimately expect by focusing my resolve on the distant and virtually obscure horizon of future possibilities. The act of living ensnares us in a web of constricting limitations from which it is nearly impossible to extricate ourselves. but no matter how convoluted the intricacy of an eventual situation might become, there is a moment in our awareness of an approaching course of actuality at its outset, when the eventuality is only a fleeting inclination, requiring no more than an attentive conscious meditation to manifest, modify, or redirect intent. Thus, contemplating the potentialities branching from a present instant in my timeline, I ponder pathways of predilection to assimilate my intention within the predetermined course of my life. This is the easiest stage of manifesting a future intent. What is considerably more challenging is to maintain the requisite of allowing an intention to travel its preordained course without further guidance from my consciousness, for it is our penchant to impose our fears on any intended objective, which unavoidably redirects its manifestation. Knowing how to manifest future change consciously is not the transcendental power it may seem to fulfill our dreams and desires. For in the process of acquiring this knowledge, it liberates us from the shackles our world places on us, to crave for so many things the acquisition thereof occupies what little consciousness we possess. Once I grasped how the substantive physicalities of reality are fashioned from the constituents of matter and energy infused with binding filaments of consciousness, it eliminated the cravings, desires, and lusts I affected for people, possessions, fame or fortune, replacing them with an exacting comprehension concerning our responsibility as perspicacious conscious beings to envision, create and maintain a compassionate reality free of dissonance. Abstractly, this is no easy task, for the metaphysical conceptual constructs defining reality involuntarily create diametric opposites in time, which make one take pause concerning the ethicality of conceiving and creating any change at all. For example, the conceptualization of heat perforce dictates the existence of its opposite, cold, and the manifestation of the actuality of wealth unavoidably creates the obverse state of poverty, just as surely as the conceptualization of life generates the certainty of death. This is the catch-22 of our reality. If we elect to exercise the inexhaustible inspiration a boundless consciousness affords us, then we should be omniscient about the ultimate effects of our actions before we decide to tweak a twig or thoughtlessly bend a bough. By consciously assimilating our present temporalities with those in our past via recollection, each of us should be prophetically able to perceive the predominant nexus points causally leading to potential future states of being. Since dreams juxtapose us within parallel or alternative realities, similar if not the same as the ones in which we customarily live, they are excellent vehicles for this methodology of interdimensional communication. And as I have also learned, it is equally possible for us to communicate with the future and past instantiations of ourselves through the conduit of consciousness connecting the perceptivities of our recollections and preordained proclivities transpiring within our uniquely individual timelines, enduringly extant and accessible from a fifth-dimensional perspectivity. A short history of lucid dreaming. Whether we concede it or not, dreams are conduits to the alternate accessible actualities outside the restrictive limitations reality imposes on us. This observable truth clearly seemed self-evident to our historic progenitors, who considered dreams and the interpretation of those dreams regarding how they relate to reality an integral aspect of human existentiality. So it seems contrarily unconscionable that almost all people living within our current temporality mystifyingly deign to ignore dreams entirely, despite the fact they can access them during a third of their lifetimes while asleep. The greater my erudite familiarity and expertise at enduring the multidimensionalities of objective or self-instantiated realities consciously manifesting within my dreams, then the stronger my certainty of comprehension concerning why human consciousness can manipulate dream realities infinitely more fluidly than it can maneuver most waking realities. When we maintain conscious lucidity in dreams, we can easily ascertain how to circumvent the snares of life's attachments, which sad to say usually imprison us within the multitude of fixated states of inadaptability inherently mandated within waking reality when we naively profess our inability to live without someone or something. The term lucid dream applies to a dream in which the dreamer is consciously aware that he or she is dreaming. The Dutch psychiatrist Frederik van Eden, 1860–1932, coined the phrase. He advocated that in lucid dreams, the dreamer wields control over his participation within the dream by manipulating the experiences imagined in the dream environment. The psychiatrist maintained a lucid dream could be as realistic and vivid as ordinary reality. While it may be possible for some dreamers to enter a lucid dream on demand when they lay down to sleep, as yet I cannot. I have, however, learned to re-enter any lucid dream on awakening, as many times as deemed necessary to re-examine the scenes in startling detail, just as I learned to eidetically recall recollections of the past events I have lived to astutely reassess their aspects and intricacies. I might add that while I cannot lucidly dream on cue on laying down to sleep, the frequency with which I dream lucidly appears to increase with every dream I experience. Not counting dreams, I might have infused with my consciousness but did not. Fully 2/3 of the dreams I now experience are extraordinarily lucid. The concept of lucid dreaming was not widely known when the Swiss psychotherapist Carl Jung, 1875 to 1961, advanced his innovative hypotheses about the collective unconscious, dream analysis, and dream symbolization. Jung believed, while the personal unconscious is unique to each individual, the collective unconscious taps into a reservoir of archetypal memories unique to each species. Therefore, while our dreams may often be comprised of direct memories of people and places from our personal experience, additionally, images dreamed may represent archetypal remnants emanating from the deepest recesses of our genetic memories within a collective unconscious. Concepts such as the anima and animus, the shadow, the great mother, and the wise old man represent motifs, which may vary a great deal without losing its instinctual symbolic pattern to provide momentous transition during rites of passage from one stage of life to the next, marked by archetypal events such as birth, death, separation from parents and marriage. Jung believed these archetypes act as symbols of our unconscious attitudes in our dreams, in essence, hidden from the conscious mind as autonomous manifestations perceived by every dreamer as personages outside of self. The advent of these archetypes in dreams increases our awareness of our unconscious attitudes and assimilates contrasting parts of our psyches, contributing ultimately to a more holistic self-understanding, which in fact, is precisely the effect lucid dreams have on me. So how can you learn to dream lucidly, and tap into the genetic memories of Jung's collective unconscious? To awaken fully conscious in a dream, it is important to set up cues to snap awake. As mentioned, falling is an excellent cue that works more times than not, but almost anything that startles us to take stock of the dream reality in which we persist, works equally well. Thus, spotting my reflection in a mirror, a pane of glass, or a pool of water recurrently snaps me conscious, sometimes because I see myself at unexpected ages, and other times because I do not recognize myself at all. Additionally, more and more I find the act of looking for something I cannot find will similarly bring me into wakefulness. And any time I find myself or another person threatened in a dream, my full consciousness immediately precipitates, subsequently allowing me to incise or dissolve the perilous threat from my dream reality, and thereby render it a non sequitur. Of course, a dream in which I ingest a hallucinogenic substance awakens me to an altered state of reality indistinguishable from the other waking trips on mind-altering drugs I experienced in my youth. Reality in these lucid dreams can change starkly so rapidly, they can seem like struggling to stay a horse a bucking bronco while at the same time riding in an out-of-control roller coaster through scenes cut from hundreds of movies randomly edited together. The only reason I can maintain my continuity of consciousness in these tripping dreams is because decades past, I learned how to subsist in altered states triggered by psychotropic influences. And so, I recall details no matter how aberrant or unimaginable. Ultimately, I believe the cues we use to awaken in a dream will vary in accordance with the life experiences we have had in our waking reality, our prior dreams, and the altered states we have known. Just look for things or events that startle you enough to make you look twice, for it is in the act of focusing on a detail in a dream that allows consciousness to suffuse it with self-awareness. Decades ago, living at Singing Stones and practicing dreamwalking each night, before I fell asleep, I meditated on using fear in a dream as my spiritual trigger to prompt me to awaken to full consciousness. I do not know how long I practiced this technique, but it ultimately worked. Now, a side effect of waking consciously in a dream is we customarily know we are asleep, so there is nothing actually to fear. And in the decades since, I have become lucidly conscious so frequently, I no longer have a doubt I can control a dream's outcome, if not with my thoughts, then with the wizardly powers the dream reality offers a fully conscious entity. Hence, the sense of fear I once used to awaken in my dreams eventually stopped being useful. Typically, when I experience fear in a dream, it is for someone in the dream who was in trouble. But I rarely feel fear for myself. Oddly, fearing for a dream person still usually makes me conscious. And perhaps because of who I am, I usually go to the trouble of assisting him or her. If not in that moment in the dream timeline, then in a replay dream I initiate immediately after I awaken. Be aware, fear peculiarly is also the emotion, which may prevent us from experiencing lucid dreams, for the fear of falling or of dying, or of confronting an unknown threat, or a known but dreaded situation, can also coerce us to waken in bed rather than in the dream if we are not vigilant. Consequently, I recommend that once you are comfortable with your ability to awaken reliably in a dream, you begin replacing fear as a dream trigger, and eliminate fright from your conscious and unconscious psyches. I have never found anything in a dream that I could not overcome with consciousness. Just be tolerant with your present limitations in dreams, and in time you will lose your fears and be able to enjoy the wonderment of this threshold into an infinity of parallel realities with the equivalent degree of consciousness you employ in your waking life. The last point I want to mention is how to remember a lucid dream after you have experienced it. For me, the easiest way to remember every nuance of lucidity is by reviewing the dream in precise detail repeatedly for 30 to 45 minutes. I also find it works equally well to re-enter and continue the earlier dream several times in a semi-somnolent state between wakefulness and sleep, to instill it more profoundly into my conscious recollection. Lastly, at least originally, I recommend you write the dream down using as much detail as you remember when you arise from bed before you forget them. For while I clearly recall lucid dreams experienced even as a boy that I never wrote down, they are generally no more than a short sequence of existential frames without any real temporal duration in change. Consequently, for me, writing down each and every insignificant detail I can remember, and then reading each dream account recurrently for several days to ferret out and transcribe supplementary details which subsequently come to mind, forever instills the lucid dream within my memory. I confess, spending 2 or 3 hours each morning scribing my lucid dreams from one day to the next can be quite tedious, especially on consecutive days. However, you might find a friend or family member also interested in dreams willing to read what you write down, and then in turn, send you their lucid dreams for your surveillance. A longtime good friend and I send each other every notable dream we experience, lucid or otherwise. Personally, I find knowing someone else will read my dream account goads me to get memories down on paper, no matter how much I would rather blow it off. Several of my more incredible lucid dreams are transcribed in Part 2 of the Art of Lucid Dreaming, including my resultant waking stream of consciousness interpretation regarding each occurrence. Perhaps, these accounts of mine own dreams, and my subsequent reflections about what each meant to me, will provide a tangy taste of the rich alternate realities waiting for you once you learn to practice, and master, the art of lucid dreaming. In case you wonder as you read, there is a reason why my dream accounts resemble any remembered detailed recollection a novelist might narrate in a book, rather than one of those invariably terse summaries transcribed in any reputable dream journal recounting the dreams recorded in an empirically controlled dream study. For my memories of my lucid dreams are just as identically inculcated within my present temporality as the real-life waking recollections I routinely consciously recall. Look for the next YouTube podcast episode of The Art of Lucid Dreaming. Episode 2.